How you doing? How are you? PR? You've got a PR.
Oh my God, yes. I'm coming into this podcast all fired up because I competed in a virtual kettlebell competition, which I know people are like, what the hell is a kettlebell competition in general? And then what is a virtual one? And a virtual one is just that we get the opportunity to compete. I can't make it to the East Coast for this competition, but Kettle Guard, which is the product that I created, is a sponsor. And also, I'm just trying to get back in the saddle and keep competing and get closer to that goal of 100 and cuckoo snatches with the 24 kg. So
Amazing.
I competed in Mike's kettlebell competition, and I competed virtually from home here. And I put up a reel on my Instagram just to kind of show people like exactly the silliness of things you do prior. And actually, it's funny that I should say what we started with, because it's perfect to what we're going to be talking about tonight. But in kettlebell competitions, it's based upon how many reps you can get with the kettlebell in a certain amount of time. But it's also based on your body weight, which kind of puts you in a certain like kettlebell class, and then the actual like weight of the kettlebell. So when you compete virtually, because you're here and you want to be honest, you actually have to take a video of you on the scale.
I was wondering about that. Oh, amazing.
So Jeff, my video producer, takes a video of me. So we're just being super honest, and he tells me, that she shows the camera like what my weight is. Then I get off the scale, and then I hold my kettlebell and I put the kettlebell on the scale.
Brilliant.
Which wasn't like totally on the video. And then we weigh the kettlebell. I'm weighed. I put a little chalk on my hands. The video still has to keep going because it can't look like it stopped and started, right? It has to be all one video. And then I put a little more chalk on my hands because I'm usually a little nervous. Today, I just set the clock, and I set it for a particular amount of time. I had the song that I needed on repeat. I loop the same song, so it just keeps playing, usually
what
2 times.
What song
is it? Tonight, it was Drake, Money in the Grave.
Yeah. I mean,
it is
that,
like straight up, right? Yeah, it's not a sweet song.
Yeah. And
I need something that's not sweet.
And how long does it take, Jess?
Yeah, so you have up to 10 minutes to do the competition or to do the event. And I kind of knew in my head that I didn't want to be ruled by the number, because this is a psychological game. From the moment you step on the scale, actually, to finishing the competition. So I decided that I would just set the clock for 8 minutes, which I typically can't get to 8 minutes. I usually get to about like 7.5, but 8 minutes was like a nice buffer. So I figured if I can get close to 8 minutes, I'll get close to the number, just because it's like in a race, if I can just make it that amount of time. So I set it the clock for 8 minutes, and I think I got maybe like 7:45 or something like that.
Amazing. Who's counting the reps?
So this particular time, I didn't want anybody to count. I just wanted the video to count the reps. I didn't want to, I just wanted to like let the clock go. And so I did. And then what you do is you load it up into YouTube, and then Mike, who's running this kettlebell competition, you load up on YouTube, then he'll judge it. So you have like a professional judge who judges your, and it's a PR for me because I also am a kettlebell athlete. So I know what a good rep looks like and what one doesn't. And those were all like solid reps. But anyways, the judge will still professionally judge it. And then I'll get kind of thrown into when the actual competition, non-virtual version. And then they'll come back and they'll let me know how I placed and what I did and the whole thing. So I'm happy that I showed up. But yeah, it's ironic that it all started. You throw yourself onto a scale to start. It's the beginning.
And funny, you almost broke the first rule of weighing yourself on scales, because what time of the day did you weigh yourself?
Also so interesting, because people are going to have lots of like opinions about this, and I kind of love it. I'm here for it, you guys. But I do not like to weigh myself at the end of the day. That is not ideal. I typically, if I'm going to get on a scale, I typically do it honestly, like in the morning after I've had coffee, after I've gone to the bathroom, and I want to be completely naked with
Yeah.
nothing on my body. And then I want to get on a scale. And that will
Yeah.
be like the number that I'll do. This was not that. The one disadvantage, because literally in kettlebell competitions, I have gotten naked in a room somewhere and somebody like looks down, get your number, and then you put your clothes on. I don't care. I
Yeah.
want to like, but when you're virtual, you obviously aren't going to be doing that naked on YouTube.
Yeah.
So I usually wear like shorts and a sports bra. I take off my weightlifting shoes, so I'm barefoot. And today I took I had to do it. I had to have it in by 5 o'clock in the evening. So I weighed myself up 4:30, which is just
Yeah.
not my most enjoyable time to weigh, but that's okay. That's what it was.
And that's and absolutely that is what it is.
Mhm.
And but it's interesting because I go back and forth with people all of the time on
I bet.
scales, and I even have conversations with people who are distraught because they weighed themselves in the morning and then jumped back on the scales in the evening, and they were like, but I've gained X amount of weight. And I'm like, you haven't gained anything. Your gravitational pull is a little bit more because of the food you've got in your stomach, because of the fluid that you've had to drink. There are so many reasons, and we're going to go over them as to why the scales fluctuate. But people, it's a war zone for so many people that jumping on the scales. But
I mean, this is by the way, you guys, this is exactly what we're talking about. It's just ironic that my evening started with like weighing myself,
yeah,
like,
I know,
and weighing a kettlebell, and so it was kind of a perfect entry into, what that elicits for people. And I guess today I think the one thing that hopefully people can take away is maybe like what actually happens to the body at the end. I love how you just
Yeah.
said, like, I didn't even know that. I always assumed that I weigh more at the end of the day. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because the number on the scale often is more. And I've done that. If I'm one of those people. I don't do it regularly, but I have gotten on the scale in the morning after I've done all those things I just told you. And then I got on the scale in the evening and the numbers are different. So
Yeah.
let's start there. Why is the number different in the morning than it is at the end of the day?
Almost always, the two big reasons for those scale fluctuations are the food that you've eaten, so bulk,
Mm.
and water retention. Like these are, but actually, these are reasons why your scale weight will fluctuate even in the morning as well. So early, so if you follow your protocol of going to the bathroom, probably getting rid of like everything. You mentioned post coffee, which is what people like to do as well. It's a
100%. I'm here
good
to
way
talk
to
about
sort
a good
of
poop.
a good way to get it all out, right? But that still doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to jump on at your lightest weight, because because of the factors that influence your scale weight. And what I will say straight up is that I do think that looking at the trend over time for your scale weight is actually a really good measure of your if we're talking about fat loss or fat loss progress. But you cannot buy into the daily changes in your scale weight. You've actually got to become quite removed from that number, because what you're really looking for is what's happening with me month on month, rather than even week on week. For some people is too sort of like looking at each week is actually too much of a it's still governed a lot by these sort of fluctuating numbers, because you may weigh yourself on a heavy day every single week. And I'll explain what makes a heavy day in a minute, but which means you're never getting a true reflection of what's going on. Like, I think scales are great and I absolutely recommend them for people, but you've either got to weigh yourself 5 times a week, or you've got to weigh yourself once a month. Like, it's like that in between, even once a week, is just can be a bit devastating for some people. And I know, like when I used to go to Weight Watchers when I was like 16 and 17, and you'd go to these weekly weigh-ins on Saturday
You went
morning.
to Weight Watchers when you were 16 or 17?
Yeah, I was a veteran
Did
at
you take
diets at that
yourself there, or
point.
did your parents make you go there?
Oh, my parents would never make me go there. No, this is a way I bonded with my mum, was we dieted. It was awesome, actually. I'd never recommend any mother-daughter do that now. But that's what we did. But I just would be devastated after a quote-unquote good week that one time I weighed in, I weighed heavy. So I learned that if I had cereal the night before for dinner, it would be less food, and then I would weigh less on the scales. Like even then I'm like, there are ways that I can manipulate those scales in my favor, so I'm going to get a bit of a drop. But there are obviously smarter things to do, and the smart thing to do is just look at that number, and then take it down, and then look at the trend across a month, because that's going to give you far more intel. But also always weigh up.
Wait, repeat that line one more time. So you said earlier, because most people get on a scale, not every day. They maybe get on it once or twice a week. And you're saying you either do it every day if you want to have an accurate number, or what was the other thing you said?
Or once a month.
Okay. And then in the reason for the fluctuations typically aren't, like, I always thought it had to do with what you had the night before, or whether or not you went to the bathroom. But you're saying like the main kind of things that affect scale fluctuations are
exactly what you've said, but we break them down a bit further. Like, so it is, and we're a bit more specific. So if it's anything that affects water regulation in the body is going to affect the scales. And it's
what are the main things that affect water or water regulation or fluid regulation or whatever you said?
So when it comes to food, it's carb intake the day before. So for every gram of carbohydrate you eat, your body will store an additional 3 grams of water. So therefore, if you eat, say, 500 grams carbohydrate, let's just say, then you're going to be an extra 2 kilos on the scale the next day, because that's the gram of carbohydrate your body's storing, because we store carbohydrate. And then it's the additional 3 grams to 4 grams of water that it's pulling in with it. So carbohydrate will impact your water storage, but also,
and people are going to ask, like, they're going to say the obvious, because I still think it's funny, because when I hear carbohydrate, I immediately think like bread, pasta, grains of some sort. Is that the kind of carbohydrates you're talking about?
Yeah, all starchy carbohydrates. Yeah, yeah. So sweet potato as well, rice as well, pasta. You said grains, so fruit as well. Like, it's hard though with fruit. I mean, fruit's
that's what I was wondering too. Okay.
Yeah, but all of it impacts. So anything that will result in you storing carbohydrate.
Because those things, to me, I see it as like a sponge. Like, again, I'm like, right. So they kind of like hold the water in those types of food. Is that why you would weigh a little bit more the next day? Like, because carbs kind of just, like, they're sponges.
The glycogen. So when we eat carbohydrate, we break it down and we break it down to glucose, and that glucose is stored in the body as glycogen. And so it's a muscle storage form of carbohydrate, and that is like a sponge that'll pull water into the cells. The other thing that will from what you eat is, of course, salt, because if you have a meal that is high in salt, then you will weigh more, because the salt pulls water into the cells. The sodium pulls water into the cells as well. So even in the absence of carbohydrate, your body will be holding more water. So for example, like a sushi meal out, even if you have the sashimi with the soy sauce, that's a high salt meal. That'll result in increased weight gain. Cured meats, salted popcorn, or even just a restaurant meal in general that might not even taste salty, there's always more sodium in those meals. That'll always result, even if it's like a chicken salad with dressing, like that'll result in, or could result in, a higher body weight next day.
I feel like people definitely need to be reminded of that. I know that, like, it's like my middle name. You know what I mean? I'm just like, if I go and eat all of this sodium, I love it. It tastes good, but I know what I'm in for the next day. So I think if people are needing help, we can talk about that too, like reducing some of that sodium intake, because it just shows up everywhere. It's amazing how much.
But I disagree, Jess.
You do.
Disagree.
So you think people should have sodium?
Yeah, of course. We have sodium in our drink bottles, right?
True.
But what people have to do is just know that
this is true. I am drinking an Element right now.
What we have to do,
it does have a crap ton of sodium.
Yeah, it is. The reason we're drinking it, like it tastes good to hide the fact that it's salty, right?
Yes.
But we just have to release the power that the change in scales has. that sodium brings with it, because we, you know, when we exercise and we want carbohydrate to help recover, like that's important. There's a lot of reasons why we want that. And although of course that could bring with it a whole line of disagreement, but we're not going to go there now. And then salt, we need salt for it. It helps with almost every single physiological pathway in the body. But if you have more salt than normal, you will weigh more the next day. So just be mindful of that.
That's a tricky thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, but it's only
carbohydrates
tricky.
is spongy. So just know that we also need the carbohydrates, but just also be mindful if because I think, because if you know this is crazy, but if you know you're going to get on the scale, like, and you have this, I mean, if you have a different meal every night for dinner, then your weight may be different. People are eating the same exact thing every day and then waking up in the morning and their weight is a little bit different. Maybe that would seem.
It's interesting. I think what research does show is that generally speaking, our sodium levels, unless we do eat out, they're probably quite stable. So that's something. So if we always have like 3 elements in a day, then and we put salt in our food, then that it's likely to be not too different. But of course, if we eat low carb versus high carb, like if one day we're really low carb, one day we're really high carb, then that will absolutely impact what we see the next day.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So carbohydrates, sodium
fiber
could impact it, and fiber. Again, we're just sharing. We're not saying don't have these things. We're just saying these are the kind of things that could make the number on the scale fluctuate.
Yeah.
Okay. So fiber.
Yeah. So even though a diet high in fiber is like long-term effect on fat loss and weight control really helpful, because it keeps you satisfied and helps you, assists adherence to, let's say, calorie deficit or whatever. But the acute effects is that it will add bulk. And if it hasn't had time to move through your system, then you're going to notice that on the scale, because you've just got more bulk in your gut, like literally. It's like having a late meal is another one. Like that'll affect what you see on the scales as well. So from a diet perspective, all of these things are just explanations for why you weigh more on the scale. And it's no big deal. Like it really isn't. But people will panic. Like I had one lady in my program, she was like, Mikki, I had a meal out with my friend. We had like 1.5 glasses of wine and I felt really good about my choices. They weren't perfect choices, but didn't need to be, but she felt really good about them. And she was 1.5 kilos heavier the next day. And she said, so I put an extra fasting day in and I did hill sprints. Is that a good strategy? And I'm like, that is not a good strategy. I'm like, no way. And in my head, I'm like, have you heard nothing of what I've been talking about the last 5 weeks about, action and reaction? And I'm like, no, this isn't a good strategy. Let's not do that again. We just get back to normal. And then I outlined all the reasons why the scales change as we are doing here. She's like, oh, thanks for the reminder. And because I feel like even really intelligent, logical people get caught up in the emotion of the scale.
Well, I think that I was thinking as you were talking, I was like, at first I just kind of rolled my eyes, and then I'm like, the problem with it is that we don't, you can love or hate. It doesn't matter if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, have big, strong feelings. And I totally get that. But we're really trying to kind of break down stuff when we're here together. But I think one of the things that is so, people get so tied up to when it comes to the scale is that you don't have a lot of, actually, how we're feeling is like, it doesn't even matter. It's like if the scale number is, up or down, that's kind of like the only real barometer that people still kind of like go to in this like clinical nature, right? Like who cares how I feel? But clinically, even if I hate the freaking scale, it tells me I'm up. So therefore, whatever I'm doing is wrong. Or if it's down, whatever I'm doing is right. So unless, unless you need the number to be, you know what I mean? That's another thing. Like what is, I always say, like, what is that even telling you about your health? What is that even doing? But like, it's still like, perhaps you could shed some like other suggestions besides actually how we're feeling in our body, which is a huge one. But what other clinical things do people have? You know what I mean? That says I'm moving on the right track because this number is, up or down.
So many, and we will absolutely get there. Like, and I do want to cover that off, but there are other things that I want to talk about, because so we'll absolutely get to other things that, in addition to the scales, so they're not your only barometer. Like, and there'll be things that, Jess, that when you hear them, you'll be like, of course, they're the other things that I need to have a think about as I do this. Like, they'll be really obvious, but the other things which people forget, like when you do a super hard workout the day before, particularly if you're an athlete and you're like, you might have a bit of a goal with your sport in addition to a body composition goal. People are often devastated that they spend hours out on the trails and the bike, and then they weigh more the next day, because in their head, they're like, I've expended all of these calories. Why am I weighing more? Forgetting that inflammation is a huge reason for water retention in the body too. So that's the other thing. So if you train hard, like if your PR today was, if you weren't, if this was a harder effort than you normally do, you could expect that the scales are going to be higher than what they would otherwise be the next morning, because of that inflammation that's been created.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. Not what I would have thought.
Yeah.
You always think if you expend a lot of energy and you've worked really hard, the scales would be down.
Yeah. And they will be. And if that energy expenditure has not been offset by what you've eaten, in about 2 or 3 days, you'll see it, but you don't see it immediately. And that's with all of these things. A poor sleep. So if you get a disrupted sleep, this will elevate cortisol.
Yeah.
And this impacts on sodium and potassium levels and affects water retention, and you get this subsequent increase in scales, because cortisol affects how your body regulates water, and you'll hold on to water. And so you'll feel puffy, you feel a little bit heavier.
Say what does that, what changes the puffiness? What was the thing you said before that?
It's the cortisol, because cortisol affects water regulation. So it changes
that's crazy.
It changes how your body holds or stores water or lets go of it. And then you've got more sodium in relation to water. And so you're going to retain more fluid, and you weigh more. And stress, therefore, I've mentioned cortisol in relation to a poor sleep, but being stressed also impacts on water regulation, clearly, because that's the mechanism with which poor sleep affects that acute body weight. And if it's humid, or if you're in a hot environment, then you can't sweat. Sweating isn't as effective. That will reduce the ability to lose heat through sweating, and also the cortisol response to heat stress as well. All of these things. So if you think it's not your imagination, if you wake up feeling a bit puffy on a night where you've had like a disrupted sleep, or it's been really hot because you don't have aircon. So these environmental factors also increase. So all of these things are reasons why, whilst scale weight is important, I think to look at trends over a long time, like a month timeline, month by month. If you're using that number daily to govern your mood and how you feel, then you're just you just really, you're setting yourself up to be just hugely disappointed. It's basically like a war zone for your own head.
I hope people can hear that voice, everything that you just said, and kind of just make it a little bit less, it's still emotional for people, but I hope they can see that there's so many different parts as to why your weight fluctuates, and it's not so perfect. It's not like just, I had this bad meal, I had a cheat meal, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this is the reason for it. I mean, just please understand that how you're feeling and how you're operating, there's really a lot of variables to this. But if you are consistent, kind of like in your strength work, or you're consistent in your nutritional habits, if we will, you know what I mean, then that number will stay relatively steady. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's the ultimate goal, right? To get on the scale and have it be steady, not necessarily always going down, but
It depends
steady
on
and
your
down.
goal, right? It
Yeah.
depends. Like the consistency will lead to the progress. And so you will
Mm-hmm.
consistently see progress.
There.
Yeah.
Consistently see progress, whatever your goal
Yeah.
is. Maybe it's to go up too, by the way.
Yeah,
So
it
you're
could
right.
well be.
Consistently you're
Yeah.
meeting your goals.
And you
Yeah.
asked before, like, what else will people rely on? Well, I think so it's instead of your outcome goal being tied to the number on the scale,
Mm-hmm.
I think obviously how your clothes fit,
Mm.
measurements like using hip and waist and arms. A lot of people use like body measurements as a measure of progress. How you look in the mirror, like sometimes I have clients who think they look great in the mirror, they love the way their clothes fit, and they're totally disappointed by what they see on the scales. And I'm like, nobody knows what you weigh. Like literally nobody. You do not have a neon sign like over your head that we're all seeing. Oh my God, Rachel, you're weighing 280 pounds, like there's nothing like that. So, and ultimately, if your outcome goals are attached to the behaviors and habits, then the scale will do what you want it to do. It'll trend in the direction you want it to trend in. But the problem is that people just rely on that number as the outcome goal. And then, when it doesn't go the way they think on any given day, they throw their toys. Or to your point, like, if you sometimes when you get into poor habits, the scale will go down and then people are like, oh, I can get away with this. And then, it's a whole other conversation, but that's not necessarily the case
Well,
either.
I think it's a really good reminder because that this comes up in conversation all the time, especially when people start strength workouts or they start a new workout. Sometimes they'll go like, oh my God, like I feel better. My energy's better and I look a lot better. They're so quick to discount those two things. They're so quick to discount how they're feeling, and they're so quick to discount how they're feeling in their clothes that they immediately just continue to go back to. But my weight's gone up since we started, working together. And I was like, well, I mean, like maybe check it again in 2 days and maybe it's down. But also, why is that the only like still, you know what I mean? Like I'm asking the question, they're not even sure why it's there. They're like, why? I don't know. I think I thought it just should be.
Yeah, and in part, isn't it, I think, because when we were younger and we have this sort of weight tied into our mind as where we should be, like we weren't doing the strength training that we're now doing, and muscle takes up less space than fat. Like muscle weighs the same as fat, but it takes up less space. So our body will look different, even though the weight will be the same. And so we forget that we might have, say, 123 pounds in our head, but when we were 123 pounds, we were doing step aerobics and running, whereas now we're doing hip-based work and we're strength training. Like your goal, you got to adjust your weight goal to where you are in life, not because you're older, but because your habits have changed to be better. I don't know.
I love it. I think it makes a ton of sense, like literally, but I would still have to continue to help people through this journey of being completely tied to it, because they really see it as like, well, I'm doing all the right things, you know what I mean? And everything you told me to do, and the scale isn't different. But honestly, unless you're competing in kettlebell sport where it actually matters, you know what I mean? Like
I know
what the number
right.
is, you don't really, I mean, again, I use it just kind of as another tool in my toolbox, just to sort of see and calibrate where things are for me. I do kind of do what you're saying. If I've had a particular, just how I'm feeling, it's just, again, I guess it's just another tool in my toolbox, but I try not to hold all of the weight in it. But I wonder that with people, like, what do you need the number to be? You know what I mean? Like, but it is amazing that they have numbers in their head and their mood is associated to the number in their head and the number on the scale. So I'm hopeful that we can continue to help people get more clinical. I love what you just said, though, that muscle takes up less space than fat. That's why we care about your muscle, you guys, because muscle is literally like when you say you're like, you just burn more when you have more muscle, but it's true. Like it's like we love it because it cleans the house more efficiently.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It doesn't take up,
yeah.
it doesn't need as many things to do a really great job. And nothing's, but I like that. So I think hopefully people can kind of see that when they're thinking about it in their head, and also how their clothes fit, and also how they're feeling.
Yeah.
And
too.
Also that it's okay to have carbs. It's okay to have sodium.
Salt,
it's okay to have these things,
Yeah.
I don't, none of this stuff is bad. I'm sure you put together 9,000 nutrition plans, for people in the course of a week. And I imagine, I know for you, you've even told me when you look at because I work with you too, and you will tell me, you might want to have a little steamed rice with that chicken and broccoli, because you'll probably feel more satiated. And I forget what you told me, but like, it'll give you a little more energy. You know what I mean? And the funny thing is, you may end up like, it's like when I've done that, I end up not overeating the sweets and the other things for energy.
Yeah.
Like, because I already had the energy built in from that. So it's, I know I overuse the word clinical, but it's very helpful to, when you're feeling really emotional about something, just a good reminder to go back to the science of it.
I agree. Nice one, Jess. So we'll leave it there.
Did you want to say one more thing about BMI scales?
No, because it's not something that I can talk about in about 30 seconds. So we'll leave that for another day.
That's right. We really try to do our best to keep these little gems of a podcast just in bite-sizable information for you, so you don't feel overwhelmed. But hopefully you feel excited and empowered.
Yeah, exactly.
From it.
Yeah, nice.
What are you grateful for today?
I'm grateful for the Lululemon tops that arrived that have they're like a shelf tank top, so I don't have to wear a bra with them. Amazing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
They have a built-in bra, or I don't understand the shelf thing.
Yeah. A built-in bra. That's what I mean by shelf. Yeah.
But see, I love us. We talked about this last week. It was the schedule and the diary.
Yeah,
this
and you're
week
like,
it's
what the hell
shelf.
is a diary? Yeah, the shelf. Yeah. And
well, I know what a diary is. It's just not the way you use a diary. Same thing with the shelf. We call it built-in. You call it a shelf.
Yeah.
I like it. I think it's good. I don't really, the built-in bras are nice, because then they're all kind of built. It's already there for you. I find myself moving around mine a lot, but I love that it's an option for people.
Yeah. And what about you, Jess? What are you grateful for?
I'm always grateful for you, truly. I feel really fortunate. I'm grateful I'm grateful for a PR. I'm grateful to continue to I know this sounds really cliche, but I've been competing in kettlebell sport, for a long time. Right. And, it's nice to know that as I've, am this far in the game, that I can still be the strongest version. You know what I mean? I'm like, totally that's agree. Awesome. Number on the scale, number of the kettlebell, whatever. This was still a PR for me, right? Yeah. This was still a competition PR. And I feel empowered by that. And I do think that working together, I really believe, you guys, in the people that are around you, are really critical. I have an amazing strength coach I work with, and training partner, a few people in my life, and you and Mikki, and just having the right voices. Guess what they do? They empower you, but guess what else they do? They lower your cortisol levels. You know what I mean? They really, really do. They make you feel like those are the voices that I need to hear more of. So I'm grateful for those voices in my life, and I'm grateful for hitting a PR unexpectedly.
Wow. Oh, I'm
there
so
we
stoked
are.
for you. Yeah.
I'm excited for next week.
Yeah.
Strength renewed, you guys. Strength empowered.
Strength empowered. See you, Jess.
Bye.